And hello, everybody. Welcome back to Ask the Oligarchy. We have the oligarchy on the line. How you doing today, oligarchy?
Okay, please, I'm a representative of the oligarchy.
Oh,
I,
okay.
I am not the entire.
It's more fun when you're the entire oligarchy, but okay. We'll play by your rules. Uh,
The problem here is that oligarchy means rule of the many by the few. It doesn't mean rule of the many by one. So
well,
I could
that's true. That would be an or dictatorship,
an autocracy.
an autocracy, yes. So, going to start off today by getting a little history lesson from the oligarchy on the central banking system and how we ended up with the Federal Reserve Bank that we have today, because it's really important to understand the history and that there has been dissent against having central banks throughout the American history. There was a period of American history where we did not have a central bank, and understanding the factors that brought the central bank back are important. And I hope to open up discussions about what the world or this country could look like if we removed the central bank again. So, on that
Well,
note,
as you know, most of our history has been without a central bank. We initially had a central bank that was disestablished by Andrew Jackson. We did not have another one until it was established by Woodrow Wilson. Now, in my view, Woodrow Wilson was our worst president. He was a known racist. He desegregated the federal government when he took office. The Republican administrations prior to that, while not totally, he segregated the federal government. While not totally desegregated, there were African Americans in the civil service until Woodrow Wilson took over. And it was during his administration that most of the Jim Crow laws
came into being.
were first passed in the South. And little known fact, Spanish flu began in Kansas, in Fort Leavenworth. And by entering World War I, Woodrow Wilson spread this disease throughout the world. Now, there is some speculation that it started at other places, but the only evidence that we actually have is that it started in Kansas and was spread by Woodrow Wilson through entrance into World War I. Now, before we get back to central banks, I just want to make a few other comments about Woodrow
Yes,
Wilson.
let's pile on to his grave. Go for it.
Now, as you know, World War I began with the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, and Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia.
So I've heard many times.
The Russians then declared, who were allied with Serbia, declared war on Austria-Hungary. And Germany was, because Germany was allied with Austria-Hungary in order to ensure the safety of its allies, it declared war on Russia. At that point, France and Great Britain declared war on Germany. In 1917, the war was pretty much at a stalemate. The Eastern Front had collapsed in terms of Russia, and Germany occupied large parts of the Russian Empire. But the war in the West was pretty much a stalemate, and the Austrians had crushed the Italians at the Battle of Caporetto, and the Italians were in retreat. Battle of Caporetto was in 1917. Woodrow Wilson maneuvered the country into war, even though he ran in 1916 on the platform he kept us out of war. But of course,
Well, this trope has not changed till current day. So, what politician does what they run on? I don't know any.
Right. Franklin Delano Roosevelt did the same thing in 1940, knowing that he was going to get us into World War II. But I digress.
That was in the history documentary, actually, but you can
And
see that one from two ways. Anyways,
so Woodrow Wilson enters the war. There was no reason to specifically to do it. There was the sinking of the Lusitania, but the Lusitania, which is not known by many people, was filled with armaments. And
that they were renting. We were renting to the
the British. In any case, he declares war in April of 1917. He sends troops in. They, of course, spread the flu. And because the Germans, the French and the British used colonials in their military, those colonials then brought the Spanish flu to India and China and Africa. Now, the reason why it's called the Spanish flu is Spain was the only country in Europe that had a free press. All the other countries tamped down on the spread of this flu. So it became known as the Spanish flu, even though it was Woodrow Wilson's flu. Now, the reason why I bring up the whole entrance into World War I is if Woodrow Wilson hadn't sent American troops in, the war would have fizzled out in a stalemate, and the German Empire would have continued, the Austro-Hungarian Empire would have continued, and most likely the communist government in Russia would have either been overthrown or would have been neutralized. Now, just think about what transpired after the German Empire collapsed, after the Austro-Hungarian.
Well, I mean, there's no question that it was the collapse of the German Empire that caused the rise of Hitler. I mean, this is, undisputed. You cannot make any other argument. But hindsight's 2020.
Wait, without the Nazi takeover of Germany, we would have never had the Holocaust. Most likely, China wouldn't have gone communist. All of these things follow from Woodrow Wilson entering the war. And so this is why I know you wanted to talk about the Federal Reserve System, but this is why I emphasize that Woodrow Wilson was the worst president we've ever had. And it is.
Yeah, well, I'm not disagreeing. Like, would the world be infinitely better off if we had not made it a world war? It's hard to argue against it, and there are many reasons why, which you could even use the Ukraine proxy war right now as an example. It's like more war doesn't make things better. It does not.
I can say is Woodrow Wilson's entering into the war and led to the Nazis, the fascists, the communists, and World War II.
Just like us entering into the war on terror created ISIL and da-da-da-da-da and all these. I mean, how many terrorist organizations have we created? It's always because we go to war and then we create these groups of people that now hate us because we came into their land that's thousands of miles away from our land and blew everything up and killed everybody. But anyways.
Those are points I am not going to agree with. I only bring up...
You don't have to.
All right, back to the facts. I'm not sure what more we need to discuss.
You haven't even discussed the bank. How did it come into being?
It was Woodrow Wilson.
And why did they feel the need to go to a central bank?
I assume I wasn't alive in the early part of the 20th century, but
However, you're a bit of a historian and can put it into context.
well, I think it was more to control the banking system and to ensure at least this is how it was sold. This was a time when the Democrats controlled the House and the Senate, along with obviously the executive office. And this was a way to ensure some control over the banking system.
But okay, so do you think that the Federal Reserve should have been made
Well,
as a member of the oligarchy?
I think it wouldn't have happened if the oligarchy hadn't wanted it to happen at that time. Unfortunately, as I have indicated on other episodes of this podcast, I own quite a few shares in quite a few banks. So whatever I say is some good.
And you told people last time you were going to give them some bank tips. So maybe now's the time to drop the oligarchy's bank tip of the week. What's your number one play in the banks there, oligarchy?
Well, I have to say, the past couple of weeks I have purchased Pacific West, the Bank of Western Alliance, the Bank of Hawaii, and all of these banks, which were very depressed 2 and 3 weeks ago, have all come back rather well. Now, one bank your people might want to consider is KeyCorp, Key Corporation. That is very depressed. And I think it is a fairly stable bank. It is close to a low, so
It's likely to rebound some, is what you're saying.
it is somewhat
By
rebounding,
the dip.
but not majorly like those two California banks. But I think I will be buying it in the near future. I'm going to wait and see what happens next couple of days.
Well, some uncertainty for California banks, especially anyone's associated with insurance companies, is ongoing right now because Allstate and State Farm are no longer issuing new homeowner house insurance policies. And it looks like in California, it looks like actually the entire national insurance market is going to stop offering home insurance policies in California, which is, of course, you're required to have. So the amount to insure your home is going to go up, at least double, maybe triple. Like, this is going to have an effect on California banks for sure.
Well, it's hard to imagine that in an economy which is the 7th largest in the world, that insurance companies would pull out.
Because they're taking losses because that California is not handling their fire situation correctly. And they didn't because they have these genius ecologists that were like, oh no, we can't let people do controlled burns anymore and get out of control. It's like the controlled burns, the Native Americans did it because they knew unless you burn that stuff down, and it was a natural process. Lightning hit and fire burned across the prairie and whatnot, and burns out all the underbrush. And then you don't get these fires that can take over square miles, 100 square miles, plus the flooding, plus the levees breaking because they haven't taken care of their infrastructure, plus. So it's like they can't win, the insurance companies insuring homes. So I don't know what they're going to do. But anyways, so the oligarchy wanted it. And clearly, the oligarchy makes money off of it because the heads of the Federal Reserve banks are actually just banks in America. That it's this vicious cycle of we print the money, we lend it out, we fractional reserve it, that we blow it up 20 times, we lend out what we actually have. And then when we get into trouble, the bank that prints the money buys securities from the government that get paid back in the extra dollars that it printed out.
Well,
And then
wait, I don't think the banks print the money. The money is printed by the federal government, not by the federal.
right, correct. I'm sorry. Yes. So the Federal Reserve, the federal bank prints the money. So
The Bureau of Engraving and Printing prints the money.
yes. But regardless, all of this just funnels right back to the place it started. And they never suffer any penalties because, as they are right now, where there's a deficit, they're not paying anything to the government with their overages. Like, yeah, they're required to pay their overages to the government. So the government has been riding on these overages for many a year now, but those overages are gone. And the overages they were paying back are only a quarter or maybe even 15% of how far down now we are in the red to the Fed. And the Fed doesn't have to pay anything back to the government until they recover their quote unquote losses for something that's backed by nothing. Like, it makes absolutely no sense. It's a gigantic Ponzi scheme that the US citizens pay for with inflation, because they do not suffer inflation. Only the people that are not in the 1%, they suffer inflation. And it's true suffrage. So, suffrage, like they suffer.
Oh, okay. Suffrage is the right.
Well, I know that, but they suffer.
Okay.
Do you, as a part of the oligarchy now, believe that we should continue with the Federal Reserve, given how them controlling the interest rates has impacted you as a member of the oligarchy?
Well, it impacts everyone who has to buy consumer goods or buy food. So,
but if you're wealthy enough that that's irrelevant, then it really comes down to how it impacts your investments.
Correct. The impact of rising prices obviously falls more on the middle class and the lower middle class. And it's a disproportionate amount of suffering, if you will. But on the other hand, the system does work. And the oligarchy makes money, which is the whole purpose of the oligarchy. So as long as the system works to the benefit of the oligarchy, there's no need for a change.
Well, I think that as much as probably we need to get into with that, because all I can do is just, bitch about the evilness of it and just be repeating what I said. I mean, and we would get into Bitcoin again, and yes, it is
biased against the current system because of your love of this cryptocurrency.
No, it's the love of the freedom. Don't get it twisted. It's the love of the freedom. It's they want to push the central digital bank currency, these CDBCs. Okay, that is okay. Oh, and I've been dying to talk to you about this oligarchy, Catholic oligarchy. If they go to CDBC, would this not be fulfilling the prophecy in Revelation? Because the CDBC is akin to having to take the mark of the beast. And it says that without the mark of the beast, no man shall be able to buy or sell. It's very specific.
The mark of the beast, my friend, is the Social Security number. That's the mark of the beast. And the mark of the beast was established by FDR.
That doesn't, you don't need a social security number to be able to buy or sell. That's
Yes.
not true. But since if it's CDBCs, you absolutely have to have a number to be able to buy or sell anything.
And what number do you think that's going to be? It's going to be your Social Security number.
But it's not being used that way right now, is my point.
Well,
you don't need a social security number to buy and sell shit in this country. You don't.
Really? Really?
No, you need cash. If I have cash and I walk into a Target, pick something up, hand the teller cash, they're not asking for my social security number. I have cash.
What percentage of the population uses cash to buy things as opposed to credit cards?
More than you think, because you don't live in the real world. You live in the oligarchy world.
How many credit cards do you have?
Well, I personally don't use cash often, but I don't shop really either. Like,
oh my God, cut the bullshit. Everything you buy, you use your credit card, and you can't get a credit card without your Social Security number.
No, understood. Look, we're quibbling here. My point is, it becomes the mark of the beast when you truly cannot buy or sell without that number being used. That's currently not the case, but if CDBC is allowed to happen, that will be the case. Will you support CDBCs?
No, of course not.
Okay. Well, that's good to know that there's at least a member of the oligarchy that would not support cash, which means would not support CDBCs. So there's got to be more of you. I wonder if it's the majority.
But remember, there's a generational issue here. So, I mean, I have spent most of my life in a non-CDC world, and I am adverse to major change. So it's unlikely I would participate. Now, I may be forced to participate, but if it's up to me,
would you march for that?
No.
What?
No, of course not.
You just go with it. Sure. As much money as you have that they could just turn off. Really?
First of all, that's never going to happen. Never. Never.
Okay, they're already doing it. I sent you that.
They're already doing it. Come on.
I sent you the stuff from England, what Wells Fargo's doing in England.
Okay, that's England.
Well, you don't think that's going to happen here?
No. Oh, my God.
Oh, that they won't? Okay, we'll just agree to disagree that banks will turn people's money supply off, because they will. And they're already trying it for politically motivated reasons.
What benefit is there to do that? What is the benefit of that?
To stop people from doing things that they don't want you to do. Most things require money to do them.
Like what?
Look, you can make that poor fella from the FBI that they fired and for being a whistleblower, but they won't let him take a job. Like, what
Okay,
are they
that's
doing? They're starving him out. This is something. What does a bank do if they shut off your money? They're starving you out. If they
stop.
starve you out, are you
Stop.
gonna resist again?
Wait. Why would a bank stop you from using your money? Why would that happen? What would be the economic reason?
It doesn't have to be this is my point. It doesn't have to be an economic reason. It can be a political reason.
Okay. What political reason would lead Wells Fargo?
That I'm protesting against CDBCs.
What?
That I'm protesting against CDBCs.
You mean if you're out in the street protesting against it, a bank will recognize you and take your money? Is that what you're saying?
Turn off your money. You can't access it.
Okay. Now, how far do you think that's going to go? If it's your money,
I think it'll go as far, since there's no habeas corpus. If they say it's a terrorist act, I think it'll go as far as they want it to go, because they'll just call you a terrorist. They're arrested. They tried to arrest a journalist in England from the gray zone, interrogated him for 5 hours.
Okay, those are entirely different things.
But
now, I'm not justifying whatever happened to this journalist. I don't know. I mean, you're bringing a subject up that I don't know about. But what I'm talking about is taking your money. What possible justification could they for taking your money? That would stand up in court, confiscating your money.
But you have to remember, stand up in court. If I don't have any money to pay for a lawyer, how am I even gonna stand up in court?
You don't think the ACLU would take your case?
How do I know?
Oh, come on, think about it. What you're suggesting could happen is so revolutionary that of course the ACLU would take the case.
Okay,
and
I'm just gonna put this in a place where it truly belongs in 2023. They have the ability to deep fake anything. They have the ability to know everything about everything you do if you carry your cell phone with you, and.
Who's they?
The government, the CIA, the FBI. So the NSA, all working together. So
you do know the CIA is for foreign.
Yeah, I know, but they still all work together, except for when they don't. How many botched things has there been because there was a CIA agent working the same fucking thing as an FBI agent, and they fucked it up because they didn't know that the one was CIA and the other one was FBI. That shit happens all the time.
Happens all the time. Who knows? The point here is that you're right. Under the Biden administration and the Obama administration, both the FBI and the CIA have become much more politicized. But one has to assume that when DeSantis is elected president in 2024, this will all be cleaned up.
Well, here's hoping. I think it'll be cleaned up faster with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., since he wants to reorganize them, which would take all of, well, I mean, but that's what he wants to do.
In any case, first of all, don't say stuff like that. And number two, I think DeSantis has a much better chance of being president than RFK Jr. Though I agree with you, I think RFK Jr. Would probably be very effective in depoliticizing the CIA and the FBI.
I think he'd be good just depoliticizing, period, which is why I like him better than DeSantis, because he's trying to bring people together. DeSantis, the only way he wins is to take the Trump route and try and drive people further apart.
I disagree with that. That is totally wrong. The fact that he has values that are reflected by the American family.
Well, that's true too. It's a shame he's not more
divisive.
And no, it's a shame that DeSantis doesn't have more charisma. Because he
He
is
has,
like the charisma of a turtle.
what?
Like, he's not charismatic. He's not.
Oh my God, he is beyond charismatic. Everybody here loves him.
You're living uh in that world. So of course that's the way it is. But from the outside, he's kind of like a turtle. He's like, he just doesn't have a lot of charisma.
Okay, you're wrong as you often are, and we will see what happens
We will.
when he
So
carries primaries in New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Iowa. It'll be a foregone conclusion.
I mean, I would much rather see DeSantis as the Republican candidate than Trump. So
No question, that's going to happen.
it's funny. Is this going to be another case where the mainstream media just gets it wrong? The mainstream media is just like, it's a foregone conclusion that Trump is already.
Well, of course, they're going to say that because the mainstream media traffics in misinformation and they want a Democrat to be elected. And so they will lie about in order to get, hopefully, to get Trump as the Republican nominee because they believe that Trump doesn't have a chance. DeSantis, on the other hand, will carry every state but California and New York.
Nah, not every state.
Well, you're right, not Massachusetts.
Okay. He might not win Pennsylvania either, but he probably would. But he probably would.
What? May I remind you that Trump, as way off the beaten track he carried the state of Pennsylvania.
So let's get into what the oligarchy want to talk about today, which is not on the oligarchical topics. Rather, we're going to delve into something more history. And I think that as these segments continue, you'll find that we intermix history with the discussion of today's oligarchy and politics. So this is actually also really up my alley. So where did you want to start? I'm open to any and all starting points.
Okay. I have to say that you turned me on to this show called Ancient Aliens.
Yes.
And what I not bought the fact that extraterrestrials have visited this planet. We are not alone. We have never been alone. There are some glaring historical facts which, in my mind, cannot be explained. Now, they are explained, but the explanations you hear make no sense. Let's start with Stonehenge. Now, Stonehenge was built around 3000 BC.
So they say.
By hunter-gatherers.
So they say.
Okay, all I'm saying is what they claim is this was built by hunter-gatherers. Hunter-gatherers, first of all, are not organized in terms of great numbers of people, interactions, commercial interactions, things like that. And even if this was built by small farming communities, it seems hard to imagine that people at 3000 BC in southern England would gather together and, first of all, what kind of metal did they have? Most likely they didn't have metal, or if they did,
and if they did, they didn't know how to turn it into something.
They would have had copper, and copper is very soft. But if you look at these, there are two types of stones which are used. There are sandstones, which are used as the major holding or the major blocks. And then there's bluestone. And the bluestone has to come from Wales, right, hundreds of miles away. Right. And of course, no evidence that these people had boats, though the speculation is that it was taken by boats, even though there's no evidence that they had boats, though they had gotten to England, so they had to get there somehow. So who knows? The point being that these blue stones had to come from Wales. Now, there was no central government, so let's look at how humans act. Why would the humans, at this point in time, 3000 BC, prior to the building of the pyramids, why would they decide to use stones from Wales? I mean, they had a quarry, and this quarry, which was 20 miles away, is where they got these huge sandstone stones. So why not use them? And then if you look at what's remaining, is you have these huge stones standing, and then they have lintels, these big many-ton lintels over the sandstones. Why would any, either hunter-gatherers or small farming community, why would they go to the trouble of putting those lintels on these standing stones? Now, they make this big deal about it being, the summer solstice and the winter solstice, and, the sun shines in, and this was used as some kind of spiritual or religious purpose. But it just doesn't make sense to me that human beings would go to this kind of trouble when they're either hunter-gatherers or small farmers. And there's no central control. And so that makes no sense.
Well, you have to say that humans are inherently want to have fun, and not that we don't like to work, we're made to work, but you're right, we wouldn't do something like that. So the only reason it happened is because it was easy, because this was not a complicated process. Which is why then you have to question the dating. You have to question, how old is it really? Because if in that time period, if that's when it was from, we know that was the level of technology, or we think we know, but let's just say it was. Well, then where did that technology come from? Well, then there must have been a race of humans prior to that in history that evolved, that got to a level of technology where building this thing was simple. This is what Graham Hancock talks about in the Ancient Apocalypse. That's his whole point, that there was a ancient race of humans that actually achieved far greater technical abilities than we have today. And you can argue the reason that there's no wires and shit hanging around is because they were smart enough to realize that that's not the real way to get electricity, and they just took it right out of the earth at no cost, no carbon cost, nothing.
Okay, Mr. Tesla. I only have questions. I don't have answers, but I want to move on.
Okay.
Talk about the stones below in Baalbek.
Oh, the trithlon, or the...
no, it's trilithon.
Trilithon, yes.
3 stones, they weigh 200 tons or more, and they're the base of the Temple of Jupiter. Now, if you were to research that, you would be told that these stones were quarried by the Romans. Now,
which is clearly not true.
There's no evidence of that.
And that's been a temple for multiple civilizations. The Phoenicians built on it, multiple civilizations built upon it.
Correct. But the point I'm trying to make here is there is no reason to believe that the Romans would need these 3 stones if, in fact, they were built or they were quarried by the Romans. They would have quarried much smaller stones because they would have been easier to move. So claim that they were quarried. First of all, there's no evidence they were quarried by the Romans. Reason would tell us that there would be no reason for the Romans to quarry stones of that size.
Exactly. And what reason? Why would you, because you don't need that kind of a base to put a temple on. It's ludicrous. What would you need a base like that for to actually make it functional? Or why would you need it? What would be the function? And one of the ones I like is that it was a landing spot for extraterrestrial rockets. Now, or it was a launch pad for our previous ancestors, that it was a spaceport for them. I like either of those because it makes a lot of sense that you would need something that was incredibly solid and, was not going to be destroyed upon usage for those types of things. So,
okay. Once again, I don't have an answer. I only have these questions.
Now, well, I'm just throwing out I'm throwing out possibilities.
Okay. The next thing I wanted to discuss is Abu Simbel, which is this massive temple carved into the rock
by India.
No, this is in Egypt. By Ramses II. Now, they hypothesized that it took 20 years to do this, and the Egyptians at this period of time, which was about 3,200 years ago, had only copper. And so they hypothesized that it took 20 million copper chisels in order to build this temple. Now, once again, one has to say, what kind of humans would go to that kind of trouble in order to build that temple? 20 million copper chisels.
Look, the tool marks are there. As you well know, watch Mystery History or whatever, or Ancient Aliens. It's like the tool marks are there. It was clearly made with modern diamond tip drills and probably shit that we are not even aware of, because we couldn't make some of the mirror polished surfaces today to the perfection that those are made. So
the point you make, if you look at those faces, now there are 4 statues, and they all look allegedly like Ramses II. And some have been, one of them has been destroyed by an earthquake, but the other 3 are exactly duplicate. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Which would be a CNC machine, essentially. They had to be done by something like that, where it was just printed, like 3D printed, just like, then drop another one in, and that's what you expect.
And you see the same things at the Temple of Karnak.
Oh yeah, the Karnak is amazing.
I just can't, you listen to these experts, these Egyptologists, and they talk about the perfection in the faces and how there's less than an inch difference, and you just have to say, how could this happen? Why? How? I mean, we could do this today, but
some of it we cannot. Some of that granite is milled to a perfection that is not achievable today.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because there's this, they found this artifact called Core 7, CORE-7, and it's a piece of granite that has been chiseled into, and it is unbelievable in terms of the measurements of these lines. that have been carved into this completely round piece of granite. I mean, you just go on the internet and look up Core 7 and you will be astounded.
I'll tell you what, for all the stuff we've discussed, as we're going through it, I'll put in the pictures of the different stuff you're talking about and make it cool.
The next thing I want to talk about, Antikythera. The Antikythera device. Now, this
First
was
computer.
in 1901, and they believe that it was created around 178 BC, and it is the first analog computer, and it allegedly can tell you when the next sun or moon eclipse will occur. They hypothesize that it might actually be able to tell you where the 5 classical planets, and that's Mars, Venus, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mercury, the only ones that could be seen by eyesight. But it wasn't, a duplicate was not made until the 14th century AD. So think about that. 200 BC or 178 BC, and it wasn't made again until the 14th century. Now, first of all, why is it that we only have one of them? You would think that something that was probably created in either Syracuse or Alexandria, that we would have found lots of them. But we only have one. What could that mean? Why would we only have found one?
Well, if it was actually made in that time period, it could have been by somebody who was part of the Elysian Mysteries, or somebody that was not truly a part of the state, you know, rogue scientist, whatever, developed, made, you know, and never revealed it to the Republic. I mean, that's a real possibility.
First of all, during that period of time, Hellenistic Egypt, there were incredible geniuses. The inventions which they came up with were truly amazing. We have Archimedes in Syracuse, who has come up with incredible, first of all, theories and inventions. And we know about all these things.
Yeah.
But we didn't discover this until 1901.
Well,
Doesn't make sense to me.
I still think that so much, if you go back to an idea of there was a pre-race that was much more advanced, that and then there was a great flood, wiped everything out. You have to start over from basically being caveman, almost. Some of that technology survives the flood. Some of it's found randomly through time, that smart people were able to recognize it and then put it into use, and or some of it survived, but the people that understood how to maintain it and keep it going didn't. So slowly that technology is lost because there's no one that really knows how to fix it, or when it breaks, things like this. You could see how technology could be slowly lost, that certain things could persist and or pop up through time as it's rediscovered, but only if it's rediscovered by the right person in the right place at the right time. You know, if the Antikythera device is discovered by, you know, a Neanderthal, in, when did they die out? 10,000 years ago?
No, let's try it. 40,000 years ago.
Okay, never mind. Found by a hunter-gatherer. You know, maybe it's a great weapon for them and they use it until it breaks as a weapon, and then it's gone. And then it never gets recreated. I mean, you could see this.
Well, my problem is that they've been able to date the Antikythera device to like 178 or 200 BC. You would think that we would have found other ones. Now, your
You would think
explanation,
it would be written about.
right?
You would think, but this is my point. Maybe it was somebody who was not a friend of the state, but was a very good scientist. They just never revealed it to the state.
Well, clearly it had a purpose. I mean, it
Yeah,
was.
it calculated the stuff that I've read on it. They think that it calculated all of the astronomical events that you point out, but that it probably could also be used to do math and as a calculator and really as a true analog computer.
I mean, humans being humans, you would think that something like that would have been mass produced. I mean,
Uh,
as you could mass produce back then. But I mean,
or maybe it was built way earlier and it was just a toy for an earlier civilization that was built to sit on somebody's desk and just be like a little, just like we would do today.
okay. I mean, the point I'm trying to make through all of this is I don't understand. The explanations that I see make no sense. Like the town in the city that they discovered in eastern Turkey, Götepe Tekke, mispronouncing it, of course. They say that predates the agricultural revolution. That makes no sense to me because I do not believe that hunter-gatherers could be organized enough to build that kind of city. I mean, you look at the stones, and the stones have carvings and the like. I just can't believe that.
Well, I think you have to, right. So you can't believe any of this, but you have to take what you can know and extrapolate back. Now, you've watched Ancient Apocalypse, you know what Graham showed about Malta. For those huge caves and or temples to be built over a time frame where them tracking Sirius moved that much pushes you all the way back to at minimum 12, 13,000 years ago, 14,000 years ago. So they clearly had, and who says it was that cycle? What if it was a whole procession before that? That now could push it back to 60, 70, 80,000 years ago.
Well, you have to be careful because clearly humans weren't evolved enough.
You don't know.
You're right. I
Because
don't.
here's the thing, like I'm writing this book, and it's like, without spoiling anything, I can say like one of the things it's doing is like presenting the first human race. And as the first race, you would have a history, but no civilization would ever truly know their real history because you don't start with writing. So until you get writing or a way of recording things, you have no way other than word of mouth to move information forward into the future. So no matter how far you go back, the most ancient civilization still would not have truly known its own history and how it started. So this is what you're left with. You can only but conjecture, but you have to take certain things as truth. Malta is real. Those temples were built to always face Sirius. The amount that it changes over the time that those are built is a very long time to make that real, but it is absolutely real because we tested it and it does line up perfectly. So it is true. Here's the other thing that you have to take into account. The first one is the most amazing one. The last one looks like it was built by a different civilization because it's not as refined. It's not as good. So you see a loss of technology. Something happened from the first one to the last one. The technology devolved. It didn't evolve. And what could happen? Well, mass catastrophes and plagues and or alien races having a nuclear war on the planet. Like, it's possible there's that place in India that's still radioactive. That they don't know why it's radioactive.
All I'm saying is, by bringing up these various things, places and devices, the explanations that we are provided do not, at least from my perspective, do not provide any realistic explanation for how these things came about.
Wow, and that's coming from the oligarchy. That's pretty hardcore.
Okay. Look at.
We will look it up. All right. Well, on that note, I think that's a good place to wrap up for today. As always, we appreciate you, Oligarchy, for keeping us informed, us non-one percenters, of what's going on the other side.
Wait, I'm a 5%er. I am not a 1%er.
Okay. Thank you for being clear about that, Oligarchy. All right. We will talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Peace out. Bye-bye. If you stayed to the end of the video, please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'm dedicated to using my lifetime of experiences in the sciences to help everyone have a better understanding of the world we live in. I'm also really trying to live as a creative. And to do that, I need support from the people that enjoy my work. You can check out my Patreon as well, where you can see original music and my digital art. Thanks.